Hello people, how are you doing tonight? I'm just going to follow up some research tonight with my Celtic gods and saints research. I found a few parallels, some more fascinating parallels in fact, that connect Scotland with biblical sources. This has interested me for a while, guys. For a couple of years I've been looking at this, and it kind of started with I was seeing parallels in Jewish heraldry and Scottish heraldry. I was seeing things in Scottish art that was similar to biblical art and British art as well. So I was thinking, what's going on here? What's this connection with Britain and the Holy Land and the Bible? We've got this strong connection. For God's sake, we created Israel, for starters. If it wasn't for Britain, Israel wouldn't exist. So Britain has this strong tie with Israel. And it goes back, guys. It goes back before the Balfour Declaration. It goes actually back to the Declaration of Arbroath. I'll show you this, guys. This is a 700-year-old document, Scottish document. But I hope you are having a good weekend. Taking it easy. Right. Right, guys. So this is a declaration of Arbroath from 1320. And this is one of Scotland's most prized documents. This document practically was asking the Pope to make us a country. It's practically kissing the Pope's feet. It's begging the Pope for the papal protection, the protection of the Church. But I'll read this article. The Declaration of Arbroath, 1320. The Declaration of Arbroath was and has been unequalled in its eloquent plea for liberty of man. From the darkness of medieval minds, it shone a torch upon future struggles which its signatures could not have foreseen or understood. The author of this noble Latin address is unknown, though it is assumed to have been composed by Bernard de Linton, Abbot of Arbroath and Chancellor of Scotland. Above the seals of 8 earls and 45 barons, it asked for the Pope's dispassionate intervention in the bloody quarrel between the Scots and the English, and so that he might understand the difference between the two. Its preamble gave him a brief history of the former. The laughable fiction of this is irrelevant. What is important is the passionate sincerity of the men who believed it, who were placing a new and heady nationalism above the feudal obligations that had divided their loyalties less than a quarter of a century before. So this is the English translation from Latin. And it begins with all the names of the nobles. So it's like, to the most holy Father and Lord in Christ, the Lord John, by divine providence, supreme pontiff of the Holy Roman and Universal Church, his humble and devout sons Duncan, Earl of Fife, Thomas Randolph, Earl of Moray, and so on. It just goes on with all the names. Down to, and the other barons and freeholders, and the whole community of the realm of Scotland send all manner of filial reverence with devout kisses of his blessed feet. So Scotland, in fact, Scotland was one of the first countries to be excommunicated from the Pope. I think it was because Robert the Bruce, he stabbed, I think it was rivals to his throne, he stabbed them in a church. I think that was like heresy, like sacrilege, whatever it is, heresy. Anyway, most holy Father and Lord, we know, and from the chronicles and books of the ancients, we find that among other famous nations, our own, the Scots, has been graced with widespread renown. They journeyed from Greater Scythia by the way of the Tyrrhenian Sea and the Pillars of Hercules, and dwelt for a long course of time in Spain, among the most savage tribes, but nowhere could they be subdued by any race, however barbarous. Thence they came, 1200 years after the people of Israel crossed the Red Sea, to their home in the west where they still live today. The Britons they first drove out, the Picts they utterly destroyed, and even though very often assailed by the Norwegians, the Danes and the English, they took possession of that home with many victories and untold efforts, and, as the historians of old time bears witness, they have held it free of all bondage ever since. In their kingdom there have reigned 113 kings of their own royal stock, the line unbroken a single foreigner. The high qualities and deserts of these people, were they not otherwise manifest, gain glory enough from this, that the King of kings and Lord of lords, our Lord Jesus Christ, after his passion and resurrection, called them, even though settled in the utmost parts of the earth, almost the first to his most holy faith, nor would he have them confirmed in that faith by merely anyone, but by the first of his apostles, by calling those second or third in rank the most gentle St. Andrew, the blessed Peter's brother, and desired him to keep them under his protection as a patron forever. So St. Andrew is Scotland's patron saint. And here they're claiming the Scots came from Greater Scythia, thence they came 1200 years after the people of Israel crossed the Red Sea to the home in the west where they still live today. The Britons they first drove out. So the Britons and the Picts were the native Britons. They were the original Brits. So these people were the Gaels. The people that wrote this document were descendants of the Gaels. Everyone thinks that Gaelic is Scotland's indigenous language, but it wasn't. It was the Picts. The Picts were Brittonic. The Picts, funnily enough, even though they were native to Britain, they were Celtic. They were a pro-Celtic culture. The Gaels were Celtic too, but they spoke different languages. They're probably from the same genetic stock, but they probably arrived in Britain hundreds of years apart. And during the last ice age, maybe this is where everyone from Britain came at one point, from this part of the world, Greater Scythia. And once the ice receded, maybe this is where the tribes came in. Maybe the Picts were the first of those tribes, waves of people coming into Britain. And the Britons. So the Welsh and the Picts, I think the Welsh language right now is the closest to what the Pictish used to speak, and Brittonic. Whilst the Gaels, they were Celtic. They came from Ireland and parts of Scotland. So it was this is practically the Gaels, the Gaelics, the Scots, saying they destroyed the Picts, and Israel was mentioned here. So to me, this is early. It's almost like an early version of Zionism in a way. And people think that I'm looking at this stuff because I'm a Zionist. I'm not a Zionist. This is a 700-year-old document talking about Israel and the people. And there's this movement called Brit-Am, B-R-I-T-A-M. And there's a Jewish guy called Yair Davidi, or David. And he says that the lost tribes of Israel they spread to Europe. They became the European royalty. So, and you've got the black Hebrew Israelites as well. You've got the black Hebrew Israelites who think that their descendant is King James from the Stuart dynasty in Scotland. So even the black Hebrew Israelites think there's some kind of connection in Scotland. This Brit-Am movement, this Jewish guy who's sitting in Israel right now making YouTube videos, think that the tribe of Dan somehow is connected to Scotland. Even our royals here in Britain, Queen Elizabeth, these royals think they're descended from King David or King Solomon, Jewish kings. This is why they've got, this is why they get anointed to go through the ritual. It's almost like the Jewish ritual. So this is the earliest form of Zionism, I think, and it's practically begging the Pope for the Pope's protection. Anyway, back to what I was talking about. I was just a wee taster of the. Back to Google Earth. This is what I was looking at, guys. So as you know, I've been reading a book by Commons Beaumont, and I was kindly invited to a group as well on Facebook. And although I do agree with a lot of stuff with Commons Beaumont, because Commons Beaumont was another guy who thought the biblical stories were connected to Britain rather than the Middle East. And I think he is right with a lot of stuff. He seems to be on the right path. But I didn't get his idea with Shetland and Seth and Abraham coming from the Shetland Isles. When I do the research, I keep getting brought back to these isles. Lewis, the Western Isles, the Isle of Lewis. And as I showed you before, guys, up here, the port of Ness, Commons Beaumont in his book, he talks about Ness being like Loch Ness over on the coast of Scotland. I think it's here, in the port of Ness. And this place here, Jura-Eoropie, I think is important. And as I explained before, guys, there was a sea god worshipped in this area called Shawnee. And as I showed you, there was a connection with Saint John and Sean. And Moloch, Saint Moloch, comes from this area as well. But I've also found a couple of new ones as well. Saint Ronan, who I think Jonah from the Bible is based on. It's based on this Ronan character, this Celtic Ronan. And so I'll show you this place, guys. Europie. Look how close to Europa it is. And funnily enough, I was looking for the earliest Christian churches in the Middle East. And what did I find? I found this. Jura-Europos Church. The Jura-Europos Church, also known as the Jura-Europos House Church, is the earliest identified Christian house church. It is located in Dura-Europos in Syria. It is one of the earliest known Christian churches and was apparently a normal domestic house converted for worship sometime between 233 and 256. When the town was abandoned after conquest by the Persians, it is less famous, smaller, more modestly decorated than the nearby Dura-Europos synagogue, though there are many other similarities between them. Although the fate of the church structure is unknown, after occupation by ISIS, its famous frescoes were removed after discovery and are now preserved at Yale Art Gallery. So this place in the middle of Syria has probably been destroyed now by ISIS. Is awfully similar to Jura-Eoropie. This is the same place we're looking at on Google Earth, guys. Jura-Eoropie is the most northerly village of the Isle of Lewis in the parish of Ness in the Outer Hebrides, Scotland. Jura-Eoropie is within the parish of Barvas. The Team Pool Mooled is to be found there. Jura-Eoropie is situated at the end of the roads from Lionel to Port Ness respectively. It's just south of the butt of Lewis and contains Jura-Eoropie Dunes Park. This is beside a beautiful beach at Traig Shanhaig. Anyway, well, there's Jura, and there's another place called Jura in Scotland. Jura, on the Western Isles as well. So we've got Jura-Eoropie and we've got Jura. And in the Middle East, we've got Jura-Europos. To me, and the thing is, The church here has been destroyed by ISIS, but the church here, Team Pal Moled, it still exists. It's a 13th century temple, but it's been built on top of an old Celtic ancient site. This is where St. Moloch comes from, which we connected with Moloch, as I'll show you. You just have to go back to my video, Celtic Gods and Saints, to see about St. Moloch, St. John. But I thought that was an interesting connection. This Jura-Eoropie on Google Earth and Jura, which are in the same islands, Europie and Jura, and Jura-Europos in Syria. Well guys, I think the earliest form of Celtic Christianity could have formed and started here in these islands. I think the Romans, when the Romans came to Britain, the Romans were still pagans people. The Romans didn't believe in Jesus, and they didn't have any concept of Christianity when they were in Britain. They were pagans, they were still Hellenistic. Hadrian, who built Hadrian's Wall, he was Hellenistic. He believed in the polytheistic Greek gods. So the Romans were pagan when they came to Britain. And who's saying that the Romans discovered Christianity in Scotland? Because we know that they got as far as Scotland. There was cultural exchanges in Scotland, and they could never conquer Scotland. But there was definitely exchanges with Scotland culturally. They could have took prisoners back to Rome from Scotland or from Ireland, where the religion was taken underground. It's like almost taking a disease back, a virus, back to their country. They either deliberately took it, or they accidentally took it back to Rome. But there's a good chance that these Christian stories started in Scotland, and they were Celtic based. They're based on Celtic stories. And the Romans came across them, took them back to Rome, and changed them to suit themselves. And then you got the Roman Catholic Church that came out of it. But this is what I think, guys. I think that Christianity is rooted in Britain. I really do. And I think it starts here in this area. I think this area in Scotland, in Isle of Lewis, and it's not Shetland like Commons Beaumont thinks. I know there's connections with Ham, Abraham, stuff like that, but I think there's more connections here. Anyway, let's have a look at the character. Let's have a look at the character Jonah. Because I've heard this argument with people. Was Jesus real? Was he a real person? Could have been based on other people? And this is the closest I probably got, was Jonah. And what's interesting about the Jonah or Jonah story is that it kind of resembles Jesus' resurrection. Jonah's getting swallowed by a fish for 3 days, 3 nights, then getting spat out. It resembles Jesus Christ's resurrection. But apparently, as you can see here, he was born 9th century BCE. So well before Jesus. Jonah, or Jonas, is a name given in the Hebrew Bible to the prophet of the North Kingdom in Israel in about the 8th century BCE. He is an eponymous central figure of the book of Jonah, in which he is called upon Yahweh to travel to Nineveh and warn its residents to repent of their sins or face divine wrath. Instead, Jonah boards a ship to Tarshish. Caught in a storm, he orders his shipmates to cast him overboard, whereupon he is swallowed by a giant fish. 3 days later, after Jonah agrees to go to Nineveh, the fish vomits him out onto the shore. Jonah successfully convinces the entire city of Nineveh to repent, but awaits outside the city to wait its destruction. Yahweh shields Jonah from the sun with a plant, but later sends a worm to cause it to wither. When Jonah complains of the bitter heat, Yahweh rebukes him. Mainstream biblical historians generally regard the book of Jonah as fictional and at least partially satirical, but the character of Jonah may have been based on a historical prophet. So, Jonah as we see here in Christianity, Jonah. See, we've got here Jonas in this picture, in this fresco. In his fresco, The Last Judgment, Michelangelo depicted Christ below Jonah to qualify the prophet as his precursor. So Jonah's above Christ. The book of Tobit. Jonah is mentioned twice in the 14th chapter of the Deuterocanonical book of Tobit, the conclusion of which finds Tobit's son Tobias at the extreme age of 127 years rejoicing at the news of Nineveh's destruction by Nebuchadnezzar and Ahasuerus, in apparent fulfillment of Jonah's prophecy against the Assyrian capital. In the New Testament, Jonah is mentioned in Matthew and in Luke. In the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus makes a reference to Jonah when he is asked for a sign by some of the scribes and the Pharisees. Jesus says the sign will be the sign of Jonah. Jonah's restoration after 3 days inside the great fish prefigures his own resurrection. Jonah is regarded as a saint. So we should really be saying Saint Jonah, people, because my research is on saints, Celtic gods, and really it's just Jonah. Really it should be called Saint Jonah. Here he's got the sort of halo around his head. So it says here, Jonah is regarded as a saint by a number of Christian denominations. He is commemorated as a prophet in the calendar of saints of the Missouri Synod of the Lutheran Church on September 22nd. On the Eastern Orthodox liturgical calendar, his feast day is September 22nd. For those churches which follow the traditional Julian calendar, September 22nd currently falls in October on the modern Gregorian calendar. In the Eastern Orthodox Church, the Book of Jonah is chanted in its entirety at the Divine Liturgy on the Holy Saturday before Pascha. He is commemorated as one of the 12 minor prophets in the calendar of saints of the Armenian Apostle Church on July the 31st. Jonah's mission to the Ninevites is commemorated by the Fast of Nineveh in Syriac and Oriental Orthodox churches. Christian theologians have traditionally interpreted Jonah as a type for Jesus Christ. Jonah being swallowed by the giant fish was regarded as a foreshadowing of Jesus' crucifixion, and the fish vomiting Jonah out on the beach was seen as a parallel for Jesus' resurrection. St. Jerome equates Jonah with Jesus' more nationalistic side and justifies Jonah's actions by arguing that Jonah acts thus as a patriot, not so much that he hates the Ninevites as that he does not want to destroy his own people. So, if we're looking for somebody that's similar, a saint, that's similar to Jesus, well, we could find this guy. And funnily enough, looking at that island on Google Earth, that island of Jura-Eoropie, there's another island that I found. And we'll go back. You see, there's the picture. Jonah getting spat out by the fish. But there's another island here, guys. It's very remote. It's one of the most remote islands. Here it is here. And this is the Isle of North Ronan. So, I found a connection with Jonas, or Saint Jonah, and Saint Ronan. And Saint Ronan came from the Isle of Lewis. And there's a similar story. Saint Ronan jumped on the back of a whale to get to this island from Jura-Eoropie. Why is Google Earth not working? Right, so here's Jura-Eoropie, and Saint Ronan jumped on the back of a whale, the story is, and travelled here to drive away the beasts. And there is a Celtic story as well that connects these Isle of Lewis and these islands up here. Rona, I think, means seal. And there was a myth about the Celts, who were a sort of mermaid people, but half seal, half human. So I wonder if this Saint Ronan was driving away those beasts when he jumped off the fish. We'll have a look at Saint Ronan and look at the parallels with Jonah. But this is the island of North Rona, and there, believe it or not, is a ruin of a church here as well. But you can't get 3D, you can't get right down onto Street View in 3D and see it in 3D because it's so remote. It's just so remote. We'll have a look at this is the island we're just looking at, North Rona. Rona, Scottish Gaelic, Rone pronounced. Rona is a remote Scottish island in the North Atlantic. Rona is often referred to as North Rona in order to distinguish it from South Rona, another small island in the Inner Hebrides. It has an area of 109 hectares, 207 acres, and a maximum elevation of 108 metres. The island lies 71 kilometres, 44 miles northeast of the Butt of Lewis and 18 kilometres east of Sulla Scare. More isolated than St Kilda, it's the most remote island in the British Isles to have ever been inhabited on a long-term basis. It's also the closest neighbour to the Faroe Islands. Because of the island's remote location and small area, it is omitted from many maps of the United Kingdom. The name Rona may come from Ronoi, Old Norse for rough island, a combination of Ron and Oi, Gaelic, Old Norse for seal and island, and respectively, or it may be named after Saint Ronan. The English language qualifier north is sometimes used to distinguish the island from Rona of Skye. In Gaelic, it is also known as Rone an Dame, which is literally Rona of the stag, but may be derived from Rone and Tabe, containing the Norse word tab, meaning ocean, and the convey meaning Rona of the Atlantic. Rona is said to have been the residence of Saint Ronan in the 8th century. A tiny early Christian oratory, which may be as early as the state built of unmortared stone, survives virtually complete on the island, the best preserved structure of this type in Scotland. A number of simple cross slabs of early medieval dates are preserved within the structure, probably the grave markers of Dark Age monks or hermits from Scotland or Ireland. This island continued to be inhabited until the entire population of 30 died shortly after 1685, after infestation by rats, probably the black rat, which reached the island after a shipwreck. But this island is connected, Rona, with Saint Ronan. So who was Saint Ronan? Saint Ronan. Who was Saint Ronan? And there was quite a few Saint Ronans, but this is the Ronan of Iona we're looking for. The story of the Saint Ronan of Iona is interesting and one of devil-bashing bishop. If you read on, you will see that the Saint Ronan is, with little doubt, our one, and not Saint Ronan the Silent as previously assumed. The irony is not lost on us all. Ronan Kilmarine was a 7th century monk of Irish descent who was a member of the religious community at St Columba in the Isle of Iona, which is just north of Mull in the Inner Hebrides. He became a leading figure in the early Christian church in Britain, rose to be a bishop. He is explicitly referred to by the Venerable Bede in the controversial with his countryman St Finan, Bishop of Lindisfarne, in 660. This controversy on the calculation of the date of Easter was ended at the Synod of Whitby in 664 when Ronan's views were upheld. So it seems a similar idea to the Jonah thing, where they were keeping with the calendar, the Easter. According to a legend, Bishop Ronan drove out the devil out of Leithen Valley, Peeblesshire, in the Scottish borders. Right. In the mid-19th century, the folklorist Alexander Carmichael took down the story told by old Angus Gunn, the Notes Ness traditionals of the holy man in the island. This told of a good and holy man in the dark grey dawn of the ages long ago, who came to the Isle of Lewis and settled in a district called Ness. He built himself a prayer house or chapel near the village of Fivepenny. However, the holy man found that people disregarded his teachings and pursued their wicked ways. It sounds like Jonah's going to Nineveh. Eventually he resolved to leave the district and prayed to be delivered, not caring where he would go. In the darkness of his prayer cell, he heard a voice telling him what he must do. He must go down to the landing place on the bay to the west of the town of Jura-Eoropie. This is in Lewis again, guys, in Scotland, St. Ronan, where he would find a messenger to carry him away. The messenger turned out to be a great sea creature called the Cinorrean crow that rose up from the depths of the sea. A rhyme taken down in 1860 gives some insight into the size of the beast. 7 herons feast for a salmon, 7 salmon feast for a seal, 7 seals feast for a small whale, 7 small whales feast for a great whale, 7 great whales feast for a Ciorrean crow, feast for the great beast of the ocean. After they looked at each other, the holy man climbed on the creature's back, and it slowly moved out into the open sea. The Ciorrean crow took its burden safely across rough winter miles of surging seas to the uninhabited island now called North Rona, which we've just looked at, people. The holy man leapt ashore, and his sacred presence drove back the strange beasts that were there. They retreated and were driven into the sea. So there we go, guys. Doesn't that sound similar to Jonah? So I think Rona and Jonah are just the same. And Jonah is probably the person that Jesus is kind of based on as well. And we have the similarity of Europie and Jura in the Western Isles. And it's funny, anywhere you try and look for Christian sites in the Middle East, they're usually not there, or the people don't think it is the right place. They've moved to Mount Zion. When you look at Israel, they keep moving Mount Zion. It's changed so many times. And then the burial of the patriarchs like Jacob, and when you look into that, even Jewish scholars say they think it's not the real tombs. So we've got South Rona here, which is different. But in South Rona, you've got places like Cana, like the Canaanites, Cana. So people, that's my presentation. I think there's going to be lots more links to these mythical Celtic gods, their old religion, and whether the Gaels forced this religion upon the Picts, or the Picts just accepted it because it was, maybe there was a disaster. Maybe all those pagan gods, those Celtic gods, became useless when there was some kind of tsunami or something that changed the environment. Maybe those gods seemed useless and they did want to follow one god. And who knows, maybe there was a form of Celtic Christianity that was taken back to Rome by the Romans and turned into Roman Catholicism. Because there is lots of connections here to Scotland and the Bible. I think that's about it, guys. So I hope you enjoyed my video. And like I said, I'm going to look more into it. But I don't think these stories, I think these stories started in Britain and they changed them for the Bible. They changed the names, they changed the places, just like any stories, guys. It's like Lord of the Rings. It's almost like Guardians of the Galaxy. It's just different characters, different places, but it's the same stories are in there. You've got the bad guy, you've got the Judas, the person that deceives you. Even when I was watching Braveheart, we all know that Braveheart's filled with lots of rubbish, but you can see that that Mel Gibson is, you know, he's quite highly religious. He's almost playing with the idea of Christianity in Scotland. And when you watch Mel Gibson at the end of that movie getting taken away on that cross and sort of tortured, it's almost like Jesus Christ. It is. And even his betrayal with Robert the Bruce, when he got betrayed of Robert the Bruce, was almost like Judas with Jesus in the Bible. And the French connection, when he's speaking French, that's connected to the Gaels and the Irish Gaels, where this religion obviously started with the Celtic. I think it's Celtic Christianity it started with. I know this is going to upset a lot of people, but I've not got any horse in this race, guys. I've not got any. I don't follow any religion. I'm fascinated with religions. I love looking into them, the stories, but I'm not a religious person. Anyway, guys, I'm going to end the stream, and I hope you've enjoyed this one. But like I said, I'll show you this island, and you should look more into it yourself. This island here, guys. Isle of Lewis. And they even found a place called Babel here. Babel. Lower Babel. Right, guys, anyway, hope you have a good weekend, and I'll see you in my next stream. See you later.